In the coming hour, South Korean leader Yoon is set to brief the public on the outcome of the Camp David Trilateral Summit. He's hoping to make the next Trilateral meetup happen here in Seoul. Starting today, South Korea and the U.S. are carrying out their Ulchi Freedom Shield exercise for the next 10 days, staging an all-out war scenario to prepare to swiftly respond to security situations. Japanese Prime Minister Kishida visited the Fukushima nuclear power plant for the first time over the weekend. The exact date for the wastewater release is expected to be announced after he sits down with fishermen who are against the plan today. President Yoon is set to address the nation about last Friday's summit with the leaders of the U.S. and Japan at Camp David. In a televised cabinet meeting at 10 a.m., the president will address the outcomes from the three countries' first standalone summit, the key of which were tightening cooperation in Indo-Pacific security and supply chain resilience in high-tech industries, and formalizing the three-way talks and joint military drills as annual events. Ahead of that, the president, as we speak, is chairing a separate cabinet meeting as part of the Ulchi Civil Defense Exercise, a 4-day annual pan-government emergency training drill to counter national emergencies. Also in tandem with the civil defense exercise, Seoul and Washington are holding their joint military drill dubbed Ulchi Freedom Shield. The two allies will be responding to diverse war scenarios with expanded field training. Our Lee Dae-hyun tells us more.
South Korea and the U.S. begin their Ulchi Freedom Shield exercise on Monday. The joint combined and interagency exercise is an 11-day event which will be rolled out in 2 sessions. It aims to strengthen the Seoul-Washington combined defense posture in the case of any possible emergency situation, including provocations by North Korea. Around 4,000 institutes and 580,000 people will participate in the military exercise.
South Korea will inspect any necessary defense posture and support strengthened government exercises to enhance national-level response capabilities.
Now, the all-out war scenario has been reorganized for this year's military drills. This time, it will reflect diverse threats within the security environment from lessons learned from recent wars and conflicts, including Pyongyang's new nuclear and missile threats and the war in Ukraine, as well as fake news that could be distributed by North Korea. A number of complementary large-scale combined training events will also be rolled out during Ulchi Freedom Shield. About 30 such events will take place, more than double that of last year. The U.S. Forces Korea says the U.S. Space Force will also take part for the first time.
You have the space component, you have the land component, air, sea, cyber, and the cognitive domains. How do you take all of those resources that commanders have at their fingertips and be able to utilize those effectively?
Besides South Korea and the U.S., United Nations member states, including Canada, France, and the U.K., are also set to participate. Some experts say that U.S. strategic assets such as the B-1B bomber may also make an appearance. Military authorities are monitoring for possible provocations by North Korea during the drills. Lee Dae-hyun, Arirang News.
And in what seems to be in response to the joint military drills, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un visited a Navy unit and inspected a cruise missile test. According to a North State-run media on Monday, the regime's leader inspected the Guard's second surface ship flotilla of the East Sea Fleet of the Navy of the Korean People's Army. He also watched on as the ship took part in a strategic cruise missiles launch drill. And the news outlet also added that the drill was aimed at carrying out an attack mission in actual war. With Japan set to release the Fukushima wastewater, Japanese Prime Minister Kishida visited the site of the plant on Sunday. Now, a move hinting that an announcement of the exact release date is imminent. Lee Seung-jae reports.
Ahead of Japan's planned release of the wastewater from the crippled Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, the country's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida on Sunday made a visit to the site to make sure everything is in check.
I would like to emphasize that this operation requires flawless handling to be sustained over the long term throughout the decommissioning process.
On the same day, Japan's Kyodo News reported that the process of releasing wastewater into the ocean will begin either in late August or early September. And according to Kishida, he will hold talks with related ministers later this week to finalize a date.
Concerning the timing of the release of Alps-treated water into the sea, the full cabinet will decide based on the status of safety works and countermeasures against rumors, and I will refrain from giving a specific timeline at this point.
During his visit to the U.S. for the Trilateral Summit with the leaders of South Korea and the U.S., Kishida told reporters that Tokyo is in the final stage of preparations to begin releasing the wastewater. According to a South Korean presidential office official, the topic of wastewater was not mentioned during the Trilateral Summit at Camp David. However, South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol said the potential safety impact of the planned release makes it the highest priority for all three countries and the international community. Once the release begins, the process is expected to take up to 30 years. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The leaders of South Korea, the U.S. and Japan have agreed to make their trilateral cooperation regular and institutional during their Camp David Trilateral Summit last Friday. But given that it was a political agreement, how far will it go and will it last? We have our top office correspondent back in Seoul to break down some key questions. Welcome back, Soo-young.
It's lovely to be here, Tammy.
All right. I hope you're not too jet-lagged.
Oh, hopefully not.
All right, let's first begin how significant the summit was in setting forth a new era in their trilateral relations between Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo.
Right, it really has to be said how determined and united that the three leaders were on really confronting threats and challenges together. First, it was pretty remarkable how they were aligning their values and visions, not only vaguely for the peace and prosperity of the Indo-Pacific, as it's been mentioned various times, but with the kind of meticulous and unprecedented details like supporting a free and united Korean peninsula, something Japan and the United States weren't all too concerned about before, and the mention of North Korea's adoption of foreign nationals, which was always an important issue for Japan. Second, the scope of cooperation between the three countries. It went beyond countering North Korea to become a very wide-ranging and very practical framework, which also touched upon the kind of ethical kind of issues as well. For instance, strengthening supply chain cooperation with early warning systems, collaborations between their leading scientists and the top institutions, to setting artificial intelligence standards and also jointly assisting development projects in the Indo-Pacific region, the Pacific Island countries, and Ukraine as well. So the three countries are really going to work together with one another across all dimensions in every possible way imaginable. In fact, they're moving as one as they engage with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, the Pacific Islands, security initiatives like AUKUS and the Quad, really becoming this an independent entity, as Seoul's top office said, in the Indo-Pacific region.
Right, Soo-young, I do have to mention, Beijing has been quite concerned or rather critical of this trilateral cooperation, right? And it also mentioned by its activities or its behavior in the South China Sea. Can you tell us more about that?
Right, so for now, it's quite clear that the three-way security cooperation is focused on deterring North Korea's threat. But then, and of course, it still hinges on the two separate ROK-US and US-Japan alliances. But again, that does leave room for more developments if needed, and officials aren't ruling anything out at this point. The so-called commitment to consult, now that's not binding as has been mentioned, but it's still quite remarkable how the three countries are going to immediately consult each other and jointly address emerging threats, whether that's security or trade. Now, on that note, it's quite clear that China is becoming a growing threat to all three nations for a number of reasons. President Yoon himself, he said that the rule of law and the freedom of navigation, the freedom in the South China Sea is essential for the peace and prosperity of the Indo-Pacific, and that is very much in line with South Korea's liberal democratic values. and also disrupting peace in regional waters. That not only affects security, but also the really important sea lines, the lines of communication, which are essential for South Korea's export-dependent economy. Not to mention, Beijing hasn't entirely been helpful in suppressing North Korea's nuclear and missile program, nor has its economic coercion done it any favors as far as the Korean or Japanese publics are concerned, with over 70% of each public seeing China as a threat. Now, Seoul has reasonably maintained that it wishes to have a mutually respectful relationship with China, with the National Security Advisor saying on Sunday that talks are ongoing to resume a three-way dialogue with Tokyo and Beijing at the top level. Thus, experts say that the scope of South Korea, the US and Japan's security framework may ironically depend very largely on whether China chooses to dial down its aggressive behavior or not.
Right, so I mentioned this earlier, that one of the most important aspects of this Trilateral Summit was institutionalizing their trilateral cooperation. The question is, though, is it sustainable?
Right, so that question of continuity, that really remains to be seen, as it's not legally binding, as you mentioned, and relies rather heavily on political will. The long-standing disputes, of course, arising from Japan's brutal colonization of South Korea in the early 20th century, that's been a huge emotional trigger point that was often politicized on both sides, making these issues a matter of national dignity. Thus, much of the focus has been on whether Seoul and Tokyo can keep the momentum going in improving their relations beyond this current administration, particularly with key elections coming up for both countries. And experts also say that US politics is somewhat of a growing risk factor as well.
It's pretty clear to me that one of the concerns that was driving the need to institutionalize and formalize and concretize, if that's a word, this emerging relationship was the possibility that the United States might, after November or January of 2025, have back in power a president who is not committed to these partnerships that we have with these two critically important Asian allies.
Well, executive leadership has been very crucial. Going forward, it would require broader institutionalization to solidify and amplify cooperation.
But there's obviously an important security dimension to this partnership. There's an important economic and trade dimension to this partnership. There's a diplomatic dimension to this partnership. There are so many areas that are going to provide fodder, if you will, for cooperation, coordination among the three countries here, that I think that the legislatures in all three countries, in my view, have a stake, have an interest in participating in this emerging partnership, and I hope they will.
Right, lots of dimensions to cooperate and collaborate in economy, security, defense, you name it. But the question is, why is it so critical, the trilateral cooperation, so important for South Korea? Does it matter for the average South Korean public?
Right, that's a very good question indeed. And well, for South Korea and South Koreans, increasing trilateral cooperation with the US, with Japan, is a crucial step, not only in terms of overcoming the country's most immediate security threat, namely North Korea, but also expanding its role in the world as a liberal democracy, protecting human rights, freedom and the rule of law with its partners across the world. It's also a matter of safeguarding the livelihoods of South Korean citizens, according to presidential spokesperson Yoon.
If all three countries expand technological and people-to-people exchanges, especially in cutting-edge fields such as AI, space and quantum tech, not only will they secure future growth engines, but they can also lead to direct economic effects such as job creation, increasing the size of the economy. Then, as industries becoming more sophisticated and more jobs are created, a virtuous cycle would increase overall welfare.
So, Yoon, before I let you go, I'm curious when and where when we actually see the next Trilateral Summit?
Right, well, for now, the leaders are going to have to wait and see when to hold their standalone summit. But we do know that President Yoon has suggested meeting in South Korea, as the leaders have already met this year in Hiroshima, Japan, and also now Camp David in America. But in the meantime, though, they are likely to hold these sideline summits when they have these global conferences. So they will be catching up quite frequently, I imagine.
I imagine too. All right, thanks always for your coverage, Suyeon. Nice to see you back in Seoul.
Yeah, lovely to be here, Tammy. Thank you.
All right. With more than half of the year 2023 already gone by, a lot has happened on the culture front over the last 8 months. Now, as we get ready for the rest of the year, you might wonder what's next. Our culture correspondent Song Yujin fills us in.
With just a third of 2023 left, there's still a lot to be excited about in the world of culture, especially when it comes to performing arts. Clearly, there has been a lot to be excited about as well. The total ticket sales for the performing arts scene in Korea during the first half of this year grew over 40% from last year. The number of shows increased by 24%. Taking the lead are musicals, making up nearly half of the ticket sales and having the highest number of tickets sold. Korean audiences will be able to enjoy 3 of the big 4 musicals this year. Cats concluded its Korean tour in June, while The Phantom of the Opera, returning after a 13-year hiatus, moved to Seoul last month after a 3-month-long run in Busan. Marking the 10th anniversary of its Korean production, Les Miserables will make its return to Korean theater in October. Classical music commands the spotlight as well, which offered the most number of shows during the first half of the year. More than 10 overseas orchestras are scheduled to perform in Korea between October and November. They include the London Philharmonic, Vienna Philharmonic, Royal Concertgebouw Orchestra, Czech Philharmonic, and the Oslo Philharmonic. World-renowned pianist Cho Sung-jin will grace the stage alongside the Berlin Philharmonic and the Leipzig Gewandhaus Orchestra. Pianist Im Yoon-chan, winner of last year's Van Cliburn International Piano Competition, will play with the Munich Philharmonic. The world of pop music is buzzing with anticipation too, with big names following in the footsteps of Harry Styles and Bruno Mars. Singer-songwriters Charlie Puth and Sam Smith are set to perform in Korea as part of their Asia tours. And don't forget the big and small screens. Although summer's big film releases have wrapped up, it's too early to be disappointed. At least that's what one film critic told us.
2 Korean films screened at this year's Cannes International Film Festival, Cobweb and Sleep, are gearing up for their premieres. There's also Dr. John and Lost Talisman starring Kang Dong-won. On the streaming front, Netflix Sweet Home will be rolling out its 2nd season in the fall.
So, even as the year winds down, the cultural scene will stay vibrant, offering plenty of entertainment. Song Yujin, Arirang News.
Cultivating watermelons can be especially tiring for farmers as they have to hunch back and kneel down. But there is now a unique method where the cultivation is done in the air instead of on the ground. Jung Eun-ju has a story.
Watermelon is one of the most popular summer fruits. Watermelons are usually grown on the ground using the conventional horizontal farming method. This means farmers have to bend down, squat, and strain their backs throughout the process, making it a physically demanding task. This watermelon farm, however, is entirely different. Watermelons ripen on a suspended net in the air. This is a patented vertical watermelon cultivation device. Once the seeds are planted, the rest of the cultivation process can be accomplished while standing. With the vertical cultivation method, the need for manual labor is significantly decreased as the working position is adjusted to match waist levels. The system also allows farmers to plant 2 rows of watermelon instead of just 1, resulting in a 1.8-fold yield increase. This vertical cultivation technique is also used to grow a type of premium fruit known as the hamiga or hami melon.
The RDA provides funding and supports the research and development of technologies that can reduce labour and increase productivity on site as the ageing rural population suffers from a labour shortage.
Around 3 years ago, the Rural Development Administration developed and promoted a similar vertical cultivation system for watermelons, fixing plastic nets on the roofs of greenhouses to support the stems and allowing the melons to grow vertically. 정은주, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Matthew Ashley, and we now turn over to stories from around the world. We begin in northern Mexico, where at least one person has been killed amid flooding caused by the arrival of tropical storm Hilary. The storm made landfall on Sunday and is moving toward the southwest United States, where preparations are being made for potentially catastrophic flooding. The U.S. state of California is already seeing increasing levels of wind and rain, and a flash flood warning has been issued to over 9 million people in downtown Los Angeles, as rainfall has surpassed 2 inches in some areas. Now, the National Weather Service predicts these storms' effects will be felt until Monday, with more than a year's worth of rain potentially falling in parts of California, Arizona and Nevada. Power outages caused by strong winds are also expected. A state of emergency has already been declared in California and Nevada to support hurricane response and recovery efforts. Now, Denmark and the Netherlands officially announced on Sunday that they will provide Ukraine with F-16 fighter jets in a move set to bolster the war-torn nation's air defenses. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen promised 19 jets to be given periodically until 2025. Dutch PM Mark Rutte, meanwhile, did not provide a figure or time frame, but Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said 42 fighter jets would be provided. The announcement comes after the U.S. on Friday wrote a letter to Denmark and the Netherlands to express Washington's support for both the transfer of F-16s and for the training of Ukrainian pilots. The first jets will be delivered after Ukrainian pilots receive at least 6 months of training. Now, Russia's first lunar lander in nearly 50 years has smashed into the surface of the moon. Russian space agency Roscosmos said on Sunday that the unmanned Luna 25 spacecraft crashed after entering a pre-landing orbit where it spun out of control. They said they lost contact with it on Saturday. Roscosmos had hoped to be first in a race with India to land on the moon's south pole on Monday to begin a search for water, an essential component to support potential human bases there. Barring any issues, India's Chandrayaan-3 craft will touch down on the lunar surface on August 23rd. And finally, Spain have won their first ever Women's World Cup, beating England 1-0 in the final. La Roja's captain Olga Carmona scored the only goal of Sunday's match in Sydney, putting the ball past England's goalkeeper in the first half. Spain almost doubled their lead in the second half after being given a penalty kick for handball, but the spot kick was saved. Spain are the 5th country to have won the trophy in the tournament's 32-year history. Meanwhile, Sweden took home bronze in Brisbane on Saturday, beating World Cup co-hosts Australia 2-0.
Good morning. Heat wave alerts were expanded to more parts of the country over the weekend, and feels like temperatures will be a couple of degrees higher due to that high humidity. There will be passing rain of 5 to 60 millimeters during the day today. Central inland areas could see 60 millimeters an hour of downpours. In fact, Seoul could see rain pounding down in the late afternoon, right before the evening commute. Late summer heat feels like showing no sign of easing up, with Seoul topping out at 32 degrees this afternoon. Daegu and Gwangju will be going up to 34. The regions that are free from passing rain, like Daegu and Busan, Gyeongju, will be under sunny skies today. Keep an umbrella handy this week. We are expecting frequent showers with a drop in highs, and they should bring more bearable morning and evening temperatures next week. Rain will start tomorrow in western parts of the country, gradually spreading nationwide by Friday. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. We'll be back tomorrow for Tuesday's edition at the same time.